So let me go to Cornel West. I heard, or The Guardian reported, that people that night who were responding to the Torch March were actually attacked with swung torches, pepper spray, and lighter fluid.
Absolutely. You had a number of the courageous students of all colors at the University of Virginia who were protesting against the neo-fascists themselves. The neo-fascists had their own ammunition, and this is very important to keep in mind because the police, for the most part, pulled back. The next day, for example, although the 20 of us who were standing, many of them clergy, we would have been crushed like cockroaches if it were not for the anarchists and the anti-fascists who approached over 350 anti-fascists. We just had 20, and we singing "This Little Light of Mine." You know what I mean? So that
Antifa meaning anti-fascist.
The anti-fascists, and the crucial role, the anarchists, because they saved our lives, actually. We would have been completely crushed, and I'll never forget that. Meaning what? Meaning that you had the police holding back on the one hand. So we couldn't even get arrested. We were there to get arrested. We couldn't get arrested because the police had pulled back and just allowing fellow citizens to go at each other, you see, and with all of the consequences that would follow therefrom. So in that sense, you know, I think what we're really seeing, though, Sister Amy, is the American empire in decay with the rule of big money, with massive militarism, facilitated by the scapegoating of the most vulnerable of immigrants, Muslims, Jews, Arabs, gay, lesbians, trans, and bisexuals, and black folk. The white supremacy was so intense. I'd never seen that kind of hatred in my life. We stood there, and 9 units went by and looking right in our eyes, and they cussing me out and so forth and so on. And they lucky I didn't lose my Holy Ghost, to tell you the truth, because I wanted to start swinging myself. I'm a Christian, but not a pacifist, you know. But I held back. But that kind of hatred, but that is just the theater. It's big money, it's big military, and the way in which this capitalist civilization is leading us toward unbelievable darkness and bleakness. And the beautiful thing is to fight back. It was a beautiful thing to see all the people coming back, but they had more fascists than anarchists, more fascists than fight back.
Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos, and I'm a sociologist and criminologist who's taught at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Yeshiva University here in New York City. Noam Chomsky recently remarked that we've never had a figure in political history who was so passionately dedicated to destroying organized human life on Earth. There's no crime equivalent to this in human history, as Donald Trump races to escalate the climate crisis, steering us toward the abyss so he can pour more profits into his pockets. To quote Chomsky, Trump is the worst criminal in history, undeniably. For Cornel West, Trump is a gangster, and what an American-style form of authoritarian neo-fascism looks like. Historically, classic fascism first emerged in Italy during World War I before spreading to other European countries. It's largely been seen as a creation of far-right, authoritarian ultranationalists rooted around a myth of needing national rebirth from some perceived or contrived decadence and weakness. Dictators used force, state-organized violence to suppress opposition and created a repressive surveillance apparatus to control people through a totalitarian one-party state. The state mobilized its military citizens to provide economic production to fight never-ending wars against criminal predators. The left was one of its main targets. Also others, Jews, and ethnic minorities. Many aspects of fascism are not far below the surface in America today. In fact, all forms of capitalist economies contain some of the institutional structures of fascism. Trump's charismatic authoritarian cult leadership, using repression and corruption, certainly mimics a fascistic style of governing as well. It could happen here, but not in the way we might think. The more likely possibility is an American future in the form of friendly fascism. America would exist within a capitalist economic system, within capitalistic economic structures, without the outward use of concentration camps, gulags, or crematoriums. As Chomsky puts it, we're lucky that there never has been an honest, charismatic figure in American history so far that could have been that full-blown fascist leader. McCarthy was too much of a thug. Nixon was too crooked. Trump is too much of a clown, a tin pot would-be dictator. So we've been lucky, but we're not going to be lucky forever, necessarily. For some, there is no one-size-fits-all generic fascism. For others, like author George Orwell, the word fascism is almost entirely meaningless. We should simply substitute bully as a synonym for fascism. We're delighted to have on the show today an academic, a writer, a researcher who's not only studied and written on the subject of fascism, but one who's been actively resisted it and protested it. That in itself is unusual. Michael Isaacson has taught in the economics department at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and has been involved in numerous organizing efforts, including protests at Trump's inauguration, Occupy Wall Street, the SDS Virginia Anarchist Federation, the Richard Spencer protests at the University of Florida, and the encampment outside City Hall in New York City called Abolition Square. His selected publications include articles in Jewish Currents, Public Seminar, Red Pepper, Think Progress, It's Going Down, and numerous other alternative journals. He's been a sought-after media figure on Fox, appearing on Kennedy and Fox Business and Tucker Carlson Tonight. And we welcome Mike back for his second appearance on The Radical Imagination. So, Michael, it is great to have you here. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and there's so much to talk about.
Great to be back.
It's great to have you. It's great to have you. So listen, help our audience understand. I mean, this is a complex phenomenon, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways of looking at this, definitions and history. Can you set the stage for our audience a little bit on how you perceive fascism? Fascism should be defined, should be resisted, a brief history of it, particularly in this country.
Yeah, so actually my dissertation that I'm working on right now is about this subject. And one of the unique things that I'm doing with it is I'm not starting with the definition of fascism per se, but rather starting with the question of who is a fascist. Because ultimately, all the anxieties that come about when talking about the definition of fascism that I usually encounter when I have these discussions with people really revolve around the idea of inaccurately defining individuals or certain institutions as fascist, either incorrectly or using a definition that doesn't correctly identify them. Okay. So instead, what I'm working with is a definition that prioritizes the actual social connections between individual fascists going back to Mussolini's revolutionary fascist party that he founded in 1915, as you said, during World War I.
Right. So you're not using any traditional definitions, but you're certainly obviously aware of the historical foundation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's not a new definition that I'm working with. I mean, this is one that has I feel like been emerging in the literature, and I feel like it's also one that people use to measure other definitions against when they have these concerns about a certain definition being inaccurate. And so I've in my first chapter of my dissertation, I actually take a long view looking at how fascism has been defined, and I identify kind of 5 major periods where certain definitions, certain styles of definition have been more prevalent. and we can talk about what those are if you'd like.
Please do. I think that'd be very helpful.
Okay. Sorry about that. So contemporary to fascism, people didn't really know what fascism was. I mean, fascists were operating semi-clandestinely, so a lot wasn't known about what fascists were about, apart from what they were putting out publicly. And it was well known that fascists are pretty chronic liars. And so that makes judging what they want, what they're about, kind of difficult. So a lot of people saw a lot of different things in fascism. As a result, what you have is what I call myopic definitions, definitions that are more interested in general social phenomena, but they look to fascism as a particular example of some extreme version of that phenomenon. So you have, for instance, Marxist philosophers who are talking about fascism as a tool of the bourgeoisie or a result of the contradictions of the capitalist system and the incompatibility with capitalism and democracy. You have the psychoanalytic philosophers who are talking about fascism as either a form of emerging repressed sexual desire or as a form of repressed authoritarian desire. You also have existentialist philosophers, Frankfurt School philosophers who are looking at the Enlightenment and seeing contradictions in kind of the core ideas of the Enlightenment and the idea of reason itself being instrumentalized as a weapon rather than being used as a tool to uncover truth. And so this kind of trend continues sort of well into the 50s and 60s. And it's eventually overtaken by what becomes what's known as fascist studies, which is the scholarly investigation of fascism itself as a phenomenon unto itself. So the first
that I find that very intriguing. What
right.
academic school is that based in, or are there departments?
Yeah, so fascist studies doesn't, it's still a very informal sort of discipline, I guess you can call it that, or field. It's very interdisciplinary. It's a lot of historians, but also political scientists, economists, anthropologists, sociologists, a lot of the humanities. But like I said, it's not really congealed into any sort of formal organizations. I mean, there are a few journals that are kind of identified with fascist studies. So there's Patterns of Prejudice is one of the ones that features largely in the literature. There's another one, Totalitarian or Political Totalitarian Regimes and Political Religions, I believe it used to be called. I don't remember what the title of the journal is currently. But there are a lot of journals that kind of feature fascist studies.
Do you see yourself as part of that movement?
Yeah, I'm definitely aspiring to be part of the fascist studies scholarship, and then I definitely see myself as kind of building towards that.
Where does the term originally come from?
Fascism?
Fascism.
So originally it comes from ancient Rome. So the fasces is that bundle of rods around an axe handle with an axe that represents kind of the unity of
and strength.
Nation around a strong core, a strong leader. This, or at least that's the way that fascists interpret this symbol. And so fascists kind of look to ancient symbols, ancient ways of living, and try to build a way to integrate that into modern day life.
And many of these so-called fascist leaders see themselves as strong men, right? Well, our new book that's going to be coming out on fascism, history of fascism, Mussolini to the present. Strong men. Okay, that's what the title, that's what the book is about. So is that again goes back to ancient Rome?
Right. So, I mean, I don't really like to look at the individual attributes of fascism, and I was going to actually get to that
Okay.
in the history I was drawing, which was in the late '60s. Sort of the trend in defining fascism was to define it in terms of like its attributes, in terms of its anti-Marxism, in terms of its anti-liberalism, in terms of its party army, in terms of its aim for totalitarianism, and all that sort of thing.
The attributes and behavior, is that what you're
Right, exactly. So the not necessarily its path to power, but the way it tries to operate in the world and the way that people notice it and see it. Right. So this is
the way it manifests itself?
right, exactly. And I call it actually the forensics of fascism, because you're looking at kind of this surface level uh, description of how fascism
Right.
presents itself to the world, but not necessarily looking at how fascism sees itself, how fascism builds its tradition in any way. It very much sees fascism as sort of a static thing.
Right. Okay.
Think
You
of
see it as an interaction, a process.
yes, exactly. So, and this is a direction that the literature in large part has moved in. So in the 70s and 80s, there's this period where the literature kind of goes through this period of nihilism towards defining fascism. A lot of it has to do with conservative scholars who are apprehensive about being identified as fascists themselves, particularly for the scholarship that they do on the subject. And so as a result, you get kind of this confusion in the literature. And so kind of the question of defining fascism sort of fades away as scholars just start researching these regimes, not really concerning themselves with, is this regime fascist or not? And so you end up with a lot of good scholarship, a lot of good historical scholarship, but not a lot of theory-driven scholarship. And that kind of changes in the 90s. Particularly Roger Griffin is one big name that comes out in literature, where he's trying to define fascism by virtue of its ideological essence. So his definition, in particular, he sees fascism as a form of the words that he uses are palingenetic ultranationalism, which basically means an obsession with national rebirth. So the idea that your nation has fallen into some sort of decadence and decay, and that there needs to be some sort of something that brings the nation back to vitality and to its youth and to its original vigor.
Right. From the sinfulness and decay it's wallowing in. I mean, the 60s was a period of mass disruption, protests, and so on, and 70s to a certain extent. The word fascism was hardly used at all there to describe what was happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends. I mean, the Black Panthers were forming their united front against fascism in the late '60s and early '70s.
SDS too.
Yeah, exactly. They were all working together on that. Yeah, no, the far left was definitely working against what they identified as fascism in American politics and American life.
They used
and they used the term explicitly. But yeah, you're right. That was relatively rare.
Relatively rare, marginalized among these groups, and never became very widespread as it is now as a form of discussion and concern.
It was really the 80s that kind of brought it back into vogue with Reagan, exactly. To really look at fascism as maybe this the model that Reagan, or at least the people that are supporting him, are interested in.
No, I'm sorry. And in fact, in my opening, the quote about friendly fascism was from a book by Bertram Gross in 1980.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a lot of literature and art that was oriented in that direction. I saw a play by Tony Kushner. I forget what the name of it is now, but it was kind of set both in the 80s and in Hitlerian Germany at the time that Hitler rose to power.
Mhm.
It was very, very powerful play that I when I saw it. But yeah, um,
So bring
so
us
yeah,
up more to date here. I mean, this has
yeah.
become
So in
term. It's all around, and
right. So into the new millennium, the first of all, Roger Griffin made it a point to make sure that everybody knew that he had the definition that was the consensus definition, irrespective of whether it was the consensus definition. Like from the get-go, he was calling it the consensus definition of fascism, even if people hadn't accepted it yet. And in large measure, people have accepted it as the consensus definition in some measure as a result. But so, and as a result, there kind of becomes this new period of nihilism where people just kind of see the question of what is fascism is settled until you get to the 21st century, where scholars are now wondering, does it make sense to define fascism according to ideology at all? Should we maybe be looking at the way that the ideology changes as a result of its proximity to power? And so you have scholars like Robert Paxton, who are introducing his 5 stages of fascism, where he says that fascism passes through these 5 stages to its ascent to power, and through these 5 stages actually changes its ideology to try and win favor of other wings of the political spectrum.
does Trump, the Trump years now represent a manifestation of one of those later stages? Are we?
Yeah, so
What
this
are
is
we
the
in
thing.
now? What are we in?
This is one of my issues with Paxton's definition, is that because he has this 5 stages of fascism, you can't identify fascism until it's already too late.
Until
Right?
it's already
Can't.
right.
Yeah, I mean, his last stage is either its entropy or its radicalization. But in either case, like fascism has already run its course, and it's like by that point, what's the point of
It's too
defining
late.
fascism
It's
anymore?
right.
Exactly.
It's
So this is where I come from with my research, is like we need a definition that first of all can identify fascism before it rises to power, but secondly is
and how to
also
respond to it.
accurate.
Right.
What?
And how to respond and react and try to
Exactly.
transform it. Right. Okay. That's a key point here. Because
Exactly.
look, we both love the academic world and so on, and the academy of ideas and all that, and critiques and so on. But you know how academics can go on and on and on. And here we have attacks, we have violence, we opened the show with a clip by with Cornel West, and in that clip when he was down in Charlottesville, here's a brief paragraph on that. You had a number of courageous students. This is from Democracy Now. This is 2017. You had a number of courageous students of all colors at the University of Virginia who were protesting against the neo-fascists themselves. The neo-fascists had their own ammunition. And this is very important to keep in mind, because the police, for the most part, pulled back the next day. Now, Cornell was in the church protesting and so on. So he was in the middle of this. For the most part, the police pulled back. The next day, for example, those 20 of us who were standing, many of them clergy, we would have been crushed like cockroaches if it were not for the anarchists and the anti-fascists who approached over 350 anti-fascists. We just had 20, and we're singing This Little Light of Mine. You know what I mean? We just had Cornell on the show a few weeks ago. So if there wasn't action taken, dear colleague and friend Cornell would have been perhaps not here.
Yeah, you protect us.
Yes, and I think that's so very important to then make the connection between the research and raising consciousness about it, and then trying to figure out what the hell do you do about it.
Right. Well, one of the things that I do in my first chapter of my dissertation, in addition to drawing up this history of the study of fascism, is also talking about how neo-fascism has changed in large or what appears in a way that appears to be in reaction to how fascism is being defined in historical literature. So fascists are looking to the historical literature to learn about fascism, to either make themselves appear less fascist to the public, or in some cases, like in the case of George Lincoln Rockwell, make themselves appear more fascist to the public. But in either case, they're using historians' definitions of fascism because that's, where you go to find information about fascism. So part of what I'm doing with my writing and is being kind of very intentional about how I write about fascism, so that you can't walk away from reading what I'm writing and be able to be a better fascist.
What are some of those manifestations, that attributes, whatever you want to call it, that we and the general public can see and recognize, and then respond to?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is really just social connection. It's like you can try to be a fascist by yourself, but it's a very it's not satisfying. I mean, people are fascists because they have friends that are fascists. People are fascists because they are part of organizations that are fascist. They post on message boards that are fascist. They go to conferences to see fascists speak. They go to protest.
People, but Mike, what is it about these people that then they find the need to join with others? I mean, and again, I know this is not, we don't want to reduce it to a psychological phenomenon, but what is it that these people are feeling or are expressing or need to express?
Well, I think it's two things. One, I think it's fascism draws from the past, and draws kind of a very simplistic narrative about the past, with kind of factoids about the past woven into a nice, neat little package about the need to dominate and to rule. And that is a very reassuring narrative to someone who kind of feels socially dislocated, who doesn't really.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the world is confusing, too complex. We need the simple answers and so on.
A simple answer that really justifies anything as long as it's empowering you. And it's like psychologically, maybe it's a rewarding ideology, it's a comforting ideology, but out in the real world, when you have to deal with other people and their feelings and their needs, it's a very damaging ideology.
So when you join with the group, it becomes such a high, and your own needs and reservations all come out and manifest themselves in a way that gives such relief in a sense, right? It's sort of redemption.
Well, this is the other thing that I think it is that it's a community. I mean, it's a community like any community is a community. It's somewhere that you can feel like you're a part of something, that you belong to something, that people understand you and you understand the people, that you can define yourself as in some way unique or different, but also find relationships with other people on the basis of being that unique, different person. And I don't think that's any different than any other thing that someone might gravitate to. It's just unfortunately, it's a very destructive thing, and it's something that's, I think, very easy to fall into, just because it's so. It really it kind of justifies really anything that you could possibly imagine, as long as it suits your needs, and your needs alone.
That's a great point. So let's turn a little bit to how anti-fascists have tried to resist the connection, these social connections, particularly in the academic world. I mean, there's been disruption of certain speakers. Let me bring Chomsky in here a little bit, to quote from him: "When a lot of young people decide to deplatform some speaker, right, I think they're making a bad mistake, even from a tactical point of view. There are much better ways to deal with it. You can run a counter session where you expose what's going on and use it as an educational opportunity. I think it's wrong in principle. It's tactically wrong. It's a gift to the far right. They love it." So imagine Noam Chomsky's here and you're responding to his criticism of the tactic that you're using, or the anti-fascists are using to to put a lid on the fact.
Right. I think it fundamentally misunderstands kind of the point of fascist public engagement, which is not to have a platform to speak. It's to have a platform to organize, to have a platform to recruit, to have a platform to engage the public in a way that brings them closer to fascism. And I don't think counter sessions are enough when you're talking about, say, the University of Florida or Michigan or whatever, creating a space where fascists can congregate safely and to plan basically what they plan, which is the eradication of everyone that's not like them.
Playing devil's advocate. Let's say this is allowed on campus and there's a free expression of this sort of crap. Can't you argue that students should be the ones to make up their minds on this?
No, I agree.
And how to respond, and to challenge or not.
Absolutely, and that's usually how it happens. Honestly, if you look at the University of University of Virginia with the Unite the Right rally. I mean, it was students that were there on the University of Virginia campus resisting the hordes of fascists that came for them. You look at the University of Florida. I mean, it was students that decided to buy to get the free tickets and disrupt Richard Spencer's speech and not let him give his speech that day. You look at the University of Michigan. Again, it was students who all decided they were going to attend and look as bored as possible so that Richard Spencer could not make his charisma bounce off of his audience as he's used to. So it was really like it is usually the communities that are directly affected that are taking the lead, and anti-fascists generally we try to support those communities in whatever way we can.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and brings up this excellent article you wrote a couple of years ago in Jewish Currents, 10 anti-fascist activities that don't involve your fists. And again, I think this needs to be stressed over and over again. Most of these activities are totally nonviolent. You're working with the community, you're trying to organize the community, you're trying to raise consciousness, start an anti-fascist reading group, pass out posters, flyer, build a neighborhood rapid response network, try to talk to one's relative. So again, the anti-fascist groups get criticized from all over, and as Trump trying to make it into a terrorist organization. First of all, it's not an organization, and the FBI found that there was no connection to violence and this organization to equate with any sort of terrorism. And thirdly, Trump had no legal justification, the right to do this. So you're criticized. Let me bring in some of the Jewish organizations and leadership there. Here's a quote from the Anti-Defamation League, who are Antifa. All forms of Antifa violence are problematic. So they choose to accentuate that.
Yeah, I don't think that anti-fascists would deny that. I think that we are very aware that all forms of violence are problematic, and that you have to be very cognizant of what it is that you're doing when you decide that you're resorting to that. I don't think that any anti-fascist would take violence as a first option. I mean, you talk to anyone in Charlottesville, or that was in Charlottesville for Unite the Right. I mean, they absolutely have trauma from what happened. Like, we do not take violence lightly, because not only does it have impact for others, it also has impact for ourselves. So, and like you said, the 10 things that you can do don't involve your fists. That's one thing. My colleague Spencer Sunshine has a list of 40 things that he's suggested that also are nonviolent. And I have a zine based on the second chapter of my dissertation, where I talk about fascist ideology and also how to talk to people that you believe are kind of towing the line or delving into that world. So, I mean, a lot of my research is about avoiding the use of physical force, the use of physical violence.
Yeah, go into that a little bit, because you did another article, befriending uh, befriending Nazis won't stop fascism.
Yes.
I think it was in Jewish Currents also, and you're Jewish, right?
Yes.
All right, so you feel this deeply and personally, and so on. But again, tell us about your research and you know.
Yeah. So here's the thing: is that fascists don't really do friendship. They do
Well, they try to be friends. You say they try to be
allegiance.
friends with other fascists, though.
Yeah, they do, but they're not equivalent relationships. They always see a hierarchy in everything. And so as a result, they view friendships as instrumental and as a means to an end. And at the end being their own personal aggrandizement. So
Like that's true with a lot of people, right?
I mean, it's also true of people who have certain personality disorders. But the idea is that this is something that fascists believe is sort of the way that things should be, the way that people should operate in the world, is this kind of Machiavellian approach to human interactions and relationships. And so as a result, when it comes to this idea of befriending fascists, it's very dangerous to recommend that someone go out and try to befriend a fascist in order to turn them to a non-fascist, because the fascist will always be trying to use that relationship as a means of turning you into a fascist and as a means of using you to help them build their life as a fascist.
Explain that a little more. That was a very interesting point. What Trump does that a lot, right?
Yeah. So
Give us an example.
So an example with Trump is, I mean, what he calls draining the swamp, which is basically firing anyone that goes against him until he finds someone that's willing to do what he wants, irrespective of the law and of consequences. And I mean, you see this with how just fascists operate in general. I mean, you see this with kind of how Matthew Heimbach has carried himself, kind of trying to get one over on everybody. Unfortunately, it backfires. Well, fortunately, maybe for everybody else, unfortunately for him, it backfires almost every time. And he has found himself in legal trouble and in squalor as a result, and without many friends. And I mean, this is kind of the reason that anti-fascists try to get people out of fascism. It's not only just that it harms other people, but it also harms the fascists themselves. There are, unless you manage to ascend to political power and rule a country, even though historically that usually means running into the ground, you are likely to face a life of social condemnation, a life of poverty, possibly a life of prison, and maybe even a life where you get killed for your fascist views, or because of the things that you did in the name of fascism. So I mean, it really is about saving these people kind of from themselves in a way. It really is a kind of dead end street.
So Trump can't be redeemed. There's no.
I don't know. It's hard to talk about redemption when you're talking about a guy who has put like thousands of people in squalid concentration camps, and whose first action as president was to basically try to shut the border to 7 countries because the people coming from there are of Muslim origin. It's hard to talk about redemption when we don't even have any sort of reparation.
I understand. You've written another wonderful article on how levels of fascist protests and actions have been diminished by activities by the anti-fascists. So how does that work? So this is a way of at least
Yeah.
keeping the lid on
So this is another thing that goes back to my research, which is viewing fascism as a material phenomenon, not an ideological phenomenon, and seeing fascism as simply the project that is maintained by fascists, either as individuals or as part of institutions, political parties, movements, regimes, etc. And so as a result, if you are able to cut off their ability to organize in that way, you cut off their ability to spread their message and to ultimately create new fascists. So one way that fascists, or that anti-fascists rather, do this is not only no platform with public speaking, but also taking away their financial platforms, informing payment processors like PayPal, like Stripe, like Venmo, Patreon, etc., that, hey, these are fascists using your platform. Either they're violating your terms of service, or you maybe need to think about changing your terms of service so that you're not basically being the money man for fascism, you know, and ultimately getting people to recognize that it is not an obligation to cater to these people. It is a choice, and it is one that you take actively, irrespective of whether that means that you take affirmative action in order to address a given issue.
Well, let's take another example, very contemporary one,
Sure.
and one you're familiar with, and you were on his show. When was it? What were we on? A couple of years ago, a year ago, or something?
2017. Yeah, it was a while.
Tucker Carlson, who is now trout fishing somewhere, a long awaited vacation. He said
Very long.
very long. All right, and but again, his head writer trolled all these fascist websites and so on, and so now he's been outed in a sense. And Carlson still has, right, the most popular show on cable TV by far now. So how do you begin to put the lid on him? What would you say to him at this point?
Well, I mean, one of the things that's been happening for quite a long time is that advertisers have been consistently pulling out of the show, and it's been a result of anti-fascists and others. I mean, not just anti-fascists, making a big deal about these things and saying that they're a problem. And then as a result, these advertisers realize that we can either put our name on this show or we don't have to. We can put our name and money elsewhere. And
Michael, you haven't gotten to the My Pillow guy. I mean, he's going to have every commercial. So right? What are you going to do about him?
I mean, that's the thing is that you isolate this and it,
as much as possible. Yeah.
I mean, you can't control what everybody does, but you control what you do, and you can try to get people to recognize that they have a responsibility to their community and to society at large.
You've been at this for several years now. Do you see a turn? Do you see this turning around?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, the election, I think, is going to, or if there's an election, it's going to make a big difference as to what happens.
If you sort of raise that question.
I think it's an if. I've thought it was an if ever since Trump got elected. I thought it was an if.
A strong if.
A strong if, and I think now with COVID, it's an even stronger if. Yeah. Maybe I'll look like a crackpot, but I also look like a crackpot before Trump got elected. So, if there's an election, I think it'll make a big difference as to whether or not this ramps back up or if it ends up dying out. If Biden ends up being able to win this, I don't think it's going to go away, but I think it's going to take people recognizing that ending fascism isn't as simple as not being a fascist. Some sort of anti-fascist action.
That's a great point. And you have commented. You admire Mark Bray, right? In his book, the Anti-Fascist Handbook. I just like to quote him. It relates to your work and your stand here he was on Democracy Now! Just a few weeks ago. And this quote from him: Well, I don't think that the scholars and writers can stand on the sidelines when it comes to fascism and Nazism. There's nothing good to be said of them. They need to be opposed. I didn't want to simply write a history that would give people a sense of what happened. I wanted to bring the voices of anti-fascists who've been confronting these heinous ideologies, these hateful groups for decades. I wanted to bring their perspectives, their experiences, their outlooks, their successes and failures to readers in a way that encourages them to learn from them and apply some of these lessons to their own struggles against their local neo-Nazis or fascists. This book includes anecdotes, stories, discussions of strategy, nonviolence, free speech. Hope it can be useful, hope it can be practical, and also 50% of the author's proceeds are being donated to the International Anti-Fascist Defense Fund. So I really want to say very personally, very deeply, I respect you and your work very, very much. And it takes a lot of guts and enormous amount of guts. And you get hit from all sides, the academic world, the Noam Chomskys and the right and so on. But I think what you're doing is so very, very important. And just in the last couple of minutes we may have, tell us again what you hope to achieve and accomplish with your dissertation.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to give people a theoretical grounding for a lot of the tactics that have been used to fight fascism, both something that explains the ones that have been successful, but also something that explains the ones that have been less successful. I find that the approaches that have been used by law enforcement, for instance, have not been successful. They've been successful at creating new fascist organizations that are much more militant because they opt for creating informants rather than trying to pull people out of fascist spheres.
And they were trying to do it with gangs also, right?
Exactly. And it's unfortunate because
Kennedy and his work at John Jay, same sort of mentality.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because
David Kennedy.
It leaves this work of trying to get these people out of these dangerous situations. It leaves us on grassroots activists who don't really have the resources to be doing this. And I mean, we do the best we can. We try to do the most right that we can. Try to harm the least amount of people, and we usually are pretty successful at that.
You really are, and time has caught up with us. Mike, finish this dissertation. We want to see this as a book. A few years from now, you'll be chairman of the department, anti-fascist studies, Columbia, Harvard. We need that. Okay. All the best. We've got to take off. You've been a great guest. We really respect you so much. It's been very enlightening. And take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Have a good time. Jim Vrettos here on The Radical Imagination. We'll see you next week. Thank you so very, very much. And thank you, Michael Isaacson, for the show today. See you next week.
Keep asking you these questions about what does a song really do? You know, does it change anything? And you keep saying, well, it doesn't. And it doesn't matter whether it changes.
Well, you
anything.
can't prove anything. Oh, it matters, but I just can't prove a thing. All I know is that throughout history, the leaders of countries have been very particular about what songs they want sung. So some people beside me, must think songs do something.
Well, I also think of that story you tell about seeing the kid in Times Square.
Oh, yeah.
The young man.
I've told that to many people. It's true. Around 1951 or 52, I think, one of these peace demonstrations that had a few lonely people holding up a sign, and this Quaker kid was holding up a sign around midnight. The person said, "Do you think you're going to change the world here at midnight with that sign?" And the kid says, "Well, I suppose not, but I'm going to make sure the world does not change me." Now, when the people all around the world say that, that's when the world will be changed. Imagine a big seesaw. One end has got a basket of rocks. It's down on the ground. The other end's half full of sand. And there's some of us got teaspoons. We're putting the sand in that basket. But most people are laughing at us. They say, "Don't you see it's leaking out as fast as you're putting it in?" We say there's more people with teaspoons all the time. One of these days, you'll see that basket full, and that whole seesaw will go just like that.
I see through the water.